Good morning. Welcome to Sojourn Grace Collective. We're so glad you're here today in our partially live service, whatever that means. We're pre-recording a little bit here. We've been talking about that. It's fun. We're kind of here. We have future selves hopping in, and I don't know. It's all what it is, right? In this weird time of COVID and virtual service. Today we are continuing in our Meaning in Movies series, and we are talking about my favorite movie of all time right now, Onward.
Yes.
The trailer for the movie seemed so stupid. We mocked it. We were sitting in a theater watching like Star Wars or something, and the trailer came on, and we looked at each other like, this is going to be real dumb. And then that one watched it and said, you have to go. And she was right. It's so good. It's the best movie of all time. So we're going to talk about it in a little bit. We hope you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, listen to us talk about it and then go watch it. That might be weird. I don't know.
Pause church, come back.
Either
It's
way.
pre-recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Push pause on this, go watch Onward, and come back and listen to us talk about it. And you guys,
Hashtag
are you guys doing a
spoilers.
song from Onward today?
We are.
Maybe it's Brandy Carlisle.
Maybe.
Not this one, though.
No.
I'm going to make you wait just a second.
It's from a different movie.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, sisters, let's go down, come on down. Oh, sisters, let's go down in the river to pray.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, brothers, let's go down, come on down. Oh, brothers, let's go down in the river to pray.
As I went down the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, children, let's go down, come on down. Oh, children, let's go down in the river to pray.
As I went down in the river to pray, studying about that good old way, and who shall wear the starry crown? Good Lord, show me the way. Oh, people, let's go down, come on down. Oh, people, let's go down in the river to pray.
Oh, that's me. Welcome to Sojourn Grace Collective. We're so glad you're here today. This is a place where you have showed up, and that's all you really need to do to know that you belong, every single part of you, that we love you, we affirm you, we celebrate every single piece of you. You don't need to be partially here. Even if we're partially here, you can bring your whole self to church. In fact, we...
Sorry, that laugh was startling.
So sing along with us, hum along with us, put us in the background as you make banana bread, whatever you want to do today.
Bang on a pot or a pan.
That's right. You can just be here and be yourself because we love you. Want to count me into this? If you're lost and lonely, go and figure out why. Take a trip to your dark side. Go on and have a good cry. 'Cause we're all lonely. We're all lonely together. I wanna see your sadness. I wanna share your sins. I wanna bleed your blood. And I wanna be let in. Don't you just, don't we all just wanna be together? Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. If your face is down, take a look around. Do your fingers blue? Do your lungs inflate? Are you tired? Are you weary of the hidden hate you've been holding? Yeah. Did you lose that love? Or have you never had it? Are you feeling sad because you did a bad thing? Hey, leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. Are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? The only way to lose that fearful feeling, replace it with love that's healing. Are you feeling fearful, brother? Are you feeling fearful, sister? Leave what's heavy, what's heavy behind. 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 Just kidding.
Hi.
Hi.
You have to do the, yeah. Hey, question of the day. This is a part where we invite you to interact with one another in the comments, so please sound off and do that. And today I am wondering, it is summertime. What are your summer traditions that you are missing out on this year because of COVID? So we're going to do a little grieving together, but also make it light and fun because it's summertime. What are those? Light and fun grieving together? Let's your traditions. What are the things, the camps, the family vacations, the areas of the country or out of the country that you like to explore? What are those things that you normally do that maybe you might be missing out on this time? Go.
the soul who understands scars that made me who I am. Through the drifting sands of time, got your back and you got mine. And if you bear a heavy load, I'll be your wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through thick and thin, for love and loss until the end. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me, yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. From the day it all began, you were there, you took my hand. When I hurt a bit too deep, you watched me as I fell asleep. When my head was in the clouds, you find a way to pull me out. You picked my heart up off the ground. It showed me love was all around. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me, yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. If you should ever bear a heavy load, I'll be your wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through thick and thin, for love and loss until the end. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. A lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me, yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. Yes, you carried me with you.
Good morning, everyone. I love and miss you all. I'm going to read a poem that I wrote to you. It's called Shelter in Place. I began life sheltered in my mother's womb, nourished, nurtured, snuggled, safe, and loved. I've sheltered with my parents, arms wrapped around me, safe, and hiding, eyes closed, under a blanket, fearful of their punishment. I've sheltered in halls and in basements with family, friends, strangers, the air electric with fear as it stormed outside. I've crawled deep inside, broken, needing to escape. I've raged with emotion and tore my skin to escape my pain. And I've sheltered in the arms of family, friends, and community, in grief, anger, joy, and love, seen and being seen. I shelter now in place for protection, alone but connected, shared from afar. Shelter, temporary protection, an action of love, a gift of grace. Thank you.
Don't cry, you're mine for forever, for forever. I need you now more than ever, more than ever. Head full of lies, sun in my eyes, you make it easy. Don't look away, these are the days you gotta believe me. When we're lost in a desert night and we're chasing a paradise. When we can't fight another fight, we're gonna make it. You're my oasis. You're my oasis.
This life is made for each other, for each other. Cross lines, mistakes, there's no other. Head full of lies, sun in my eyes. You make it easy. Nowhere to go, I'm already home. You gotta believe me.
When we're lost in the desert night and we're chasing a paradise. When we can't fight another fight, we're gonna make it. You're my oasis. You're my oasis. My oasis. You're my oasis. As I roam through the wasteland, you're the one thing I need. I see you off in the distance. You're my oasis. You're my oasis. You're my oasis. When we're lost in the desert night and we're chasing our paradise. When we can't fight another fight, we're gonna make it, lost in the desert night and we're chasing our paradise. When we can't fight another fight, we're gonna make it. You're my oasis. You're my oasis. You're my oasis. You're my oasis.
Cut to sermon. Good morning, everyone. We're back.
Here we are again.
Although you just saw
In
us
our
before
living
this
room.
in different clothes, in a different room, in a different space and time, really. The continuum is being space-time
Did
continuum.
they? I don't even remember what we did for the other
is
parts.
being-
That was a long time ago.
I think
Like a week ago.
we were
2
like
weeks ago?
there doing welcoming and other things. I don't know.
Don't remember. It was a long time ago for
I'll
us.
find out in a little bit here when I go to edit this whole thing. Oh yeah, that's what we did. So if this is all just disjointed and chaotic, you're welcome. But we're here for a second week of
Pre-recorded.
meaning in movies.
Meaning in movies. Talk about Onward. I love this movie so much. So much that
surprisingly good.
Yeah, we saw I think we already told people that, but we saw the trailer and we're like, that looks dumb. But the actual movie is delightful. I love it so much I don't even know how to talk about it, so I might say very little. This movie makes me so emotional. Makes me so emotional. All right, first question.
First question. Let's get going. If you're just joining us for the first time, we have these 6 questions that are kind of making us. That's a weird way to say it. That are helping us move through this interaction with movies and find the meaning of and the meaning in. And we talked about that in week 1. Last week we did Frozen 2 for our first movie. And here we go. We're going to jump into question 1 of this week's movie. So the question 1 is, where did you see Christ /and/or Jesus? Since I asked the question, now I'll throw it to you.
Well, yeah, so how we've been doing this question is we've broken this question up into 2 parts to try to live the truth that their kids are upstairs being loud. to try to live the truth that, Christ is not Jesus' last name. Jesus is not the only Christ. So we talked about that last week, so I won't go into that any more than we already have. But I will just say that I'll answer that question just on the Christ part, not the Jesus part. So where I saw this universal, sacred in everything story that is being played out throughout all of humanity and all of time, was in the beginning of the movie. They describe, I think it was actually a letter from their dad. His voice is describing this old world where there was magic, where everyone lived with magic. Magic was how they got things done, and it was just known that magic was a thing, and they lived, out in the open with magic. And then they describe that throughout time, people got tired of magic. The magic was actually too complicated, and it was easier to just make a light switch or whatever. And in that, for me, it kind of was a metaphor or a picture of the way that it's just always true that Christ is in us. It's just always true that we are sacred, that God is in all things and in every living being. But that throughout time, we forget it and we don't live like it's true. That felt like that's what that was. That's what I heard and saw in that story with magic. Of magic, they were still magic, because then you fast forward and they're not living like it anymore, right? But they still are. They still have magic. They still have this power. But and you see that play out, the finding it again and remembering it. It reminds me of all of us, of totally forgetting that we have God in us.
Good word.
What about you?
For me, here's how I saw Christ in Onward. So part of the Christ story for me means that once you know that death and shame do not have the last word, then it opens you up to take on life with the sort of ferocious tenacity. Once you know that death doesn't have the last word. So the early Christians believed that Jesus, who was killed by the state on a cross, later then rose from the dead and effectively showed that the worst thing that can happen to you, dying, the worst thing, still doesn't win, still doesn't have the last word. And this belief, I think, empowered the early followers of Jesus, the early Christians, to live out this radical vision of grace and compassion and kindness and loving of your enemies and seeking after justice. This belief that the worst that could happen to us wouldn't even get us in the end. And so there's this scene in Onward where Barley, who's the older brother, and Ian, younger brother, they get to this giant goalie pit. What do you call that? There's like where there's chasm. They get to this giant chasm. Thank you. I'm like, there's ground and then there's no ground for a while and then there's more ground. They get to this giant chasm and Ian has to make a spell to form an invisible bridge that they can walk across on. But you don't know the bridge is there. You just have to, you just have to step out onto it and hope that, well, there really is a bridge there. And so Barley.
Say that Jesus is the bridge. Christ is the bridge.
Dang it, you stole my thunder. Moving on. Question 2. Enneagram number. No, I'm not going to say that, Kate, but thank you for inspiring me. Maybe I'll do an addendum. But so Barley ties a rope around his brother's waist just in case the spell doesn't work and he falls. Then he's like, Ian, I've got you. It's okay. So Ian casts the spell, takes his first step out and plummets. There's no bridge to catch his feet and he starts falling. And as he's falling down, he's yelling out, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dead, I'm dead. And the rope catches him and Barley, his brother, pulls him back up from out of the chasm, the gap in the ground, and onto the ground. And he sets him down and Barley says, okay, you fell, but was that so bad? And Ian says, yes. And Barley says, but are you still alive? And Ian says, yes. And Barley says, okay, well, now you know the worst that can happen. So there's nothing to be scared of, right? I just love that line. Now you know the worst that can happen. So there's nothing to be scared of. So for me, that's just this illustration of the Christ pattern. If we can face our deepest fears, if we can make it through the hardest things, then we can know there's nothing to be afraid of.
Including our fear of death. I love that. Oh, that's so good. I love that.
Thanks.
Same. What's next?
Question 2.
Okay, we're going to bring our other favorite spiritual growth, personal growth tool into this meaning in movies. And we're going to talk about the Enneagram. Where did you see the Enneagram at play here? Did you feel like you knew the characters' Enneagram types?
Yeah. So my how I typed the characters, I think
They're all made up animated characters. They don't really have Enneagram types.
uh,
To be clear.
and yet, if the creators of the characters are creating them within any
Totally.
sort of archetype, they are sort of embodying
No,
it.
totally.
So
Yeah.
this is why I think it's so fascinating. And for me, Barley is clearly a 7, which we talked about last week. Also, Anna is a type 7.
And again, different ways of seeing that personality, right?
Oh, good, yeah.
Because they're different from each other. Well, it's just we're repeating numbers here, which I love because it actually shows that just because you're the same Enneagram type, dominant in the same type, does not mean that you're the same person, that you are even similar to each other. They're totally different characters, Anna and Barley, and yet clearly both dominant in type 7.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I bet I think 7s are kind of an easy archetype to create fictitious characters, right?
That's
They kind
true.
of
There's probably a lot of 7s.
I bet there are. And I bet even if you were to do this with a lot of movies, you would find that some numbers are more prevalent in main characters, just because maybe they're easier to write, or they're more I don't know, like whatever it is. Well,
because we have character archetypes, you're right.
Yeah.
So of course, that makes a ton of sense. That's funny because for me, well, you keep sharing what you think.
And then I think Ian, the other main character, the 2 brothers, I think I type Ian as a 6. And here's why. Because for me, the theme of fear is one of the dominant themes, as I understand it, in Onward. And it shows up over and over again. And Barley is the character who says he's not afraid of anything. And Ian embodies the character who's afraid of everything. And what I've found in Ian is this sort of energy of that everything is out to get me. And there's sort of this feeling of insecurity of going into any new adventure or trying in a new thing, which can sometimes be the stereotype of the sort of shadow side of the 6, just afraid of everything and having that sort of insecurity. So Ian strikes me as a 6, scared of everything. Barley strikes me as a 7, not scared of anything, except facing the hard, painful things, which is kind of what 7s are most afraid of. Barley is too. What about you? How'd you peg Ian?
Completely agree with Barley, completely disagree with Ian. But I don't want to disagree with you in a way that seems like I'm being preachy about the Enneagram, or I know the most about the Enneagram. I just see it differently. I don't think that 6 I think that
you've done far more training on this, so you can preach to me about the Enneagram. It's fine.
What I have learned for myself about the Enneagram is that we stereotype the 6s so much that anytime we end up seeing anxiety and fear, especially if it's very prevalent, then we're like, oh, 6. And we mistype, and we think that fear and anxiety is synonymous with being a 6. And I've come to realize and see play out a lot that, and it's obvious, this part of it, that anybody can struggle with fear and anybody can have anxiety. Anxiety can actually be a disorder, and anybody can have it. And even if it's not, anxiety disorder, anybody can struggle at a time in their life with anxiety. And anyway, the point is that I've come to ask more questions when I see someone experiencing fear and anxiety and quick to think they're 6. And for me, Ian was a perfect story of that, where yes, totally, like his mom even says he's afraid of everything and he is terrified and has a lot of anxiety. For me, he's the perfect picture of a different personality type having a lot of fear and anxiety, which certain numbers are actually more prone to as well. And 7s actually have a lot of fear and anxiety. They're in the fear triad. Anyway, but I type Ian as a 4, which was funny to me because I felt that in Frozen 2, there was a 7-4 combo. I felt that even stronger for Onward, that there was a clear 7-4 combo happening, where they're both, it's fun in siblings because Ian and Barley are brothers, grown up with the same circumstances, in the same household, so similar in life, and yet deal with those things so differently. And I think it's because of their personality types. So you watch Barley bumble through life with a lot of happiness, always looking for that silver lining, always believing in the positivity, always flipping the script. And then you see Ian do the exact opposite and he seems, again, to me, much like Elsa, to be mostly struggling with an identity crisis, which isn't a 6 thing. It's very much a 4 thing. To be asking the deep questions of who am I and what makes me me. That seems to be his main driving, and that's what the Enneagram is about, is what really is driving you. I don't see him driven by his fear. I see him dealing with a lot of fear. And even 6s, I'll go back and say to our sweet 6s, what I've come to understand is that their primary motivation is to feel safe and secure. That's not the same thing as having a lot of fear and anxiety. So subtle difference, and I get that it can manifest as a lot of fear and anxiety, but anyway.
Did you see them as, for you, a 7 and a 4? How did you see those two numbers kind of feeding off each other?
Oh, yeah, perfectly. Like, so I identify as type 4, and I feel that I need a 7 in my life. Like that yin yang combo for each other. Like the 7s need to learn to go deep into the pain, which the 4s do, and the 4s need to learn to not, and to be able to flip the script and tell a different story. So I just love watching that play out. For me, it was a classic 4-7, watching them play off of each other and balance each other out. And no, come with me here. And no, come with me here. And they were doing this constant, like what feels like opposites opposing each other, but is really true yin yang, which is opposites need each other. And then they grow like this. Anyway,
Love it.
I don't know what all these hand things mean. There's something.
Hand things don't have to mean anything. They
I
can
know
just
you talk with your hands all the time.
Just be hands. You can just, as you're talking, you can just do gestures, and people
I don't
think that it's
typically-
a little more meaningful just because of how you are maybe screwing in the light bulb with the. Yeah.
You always talk with your hands. I don't typically. So for me, it felt weird, but you're like, no, it's totally normal. What's our next question?
Question 3. How did you see yourself / your story in this movie? Go.
Oh, me?
I don't know. I mean, I could ask someone else.
For me, this is why it's hard to talk about this movie, and why I don't have a ton to say on this. But I'll say that for me, growing up watching Disney movies, being obsessed with Disney movies, I was particularly obsessed, and I'm sure there's many reasons, but one of the reasons why is because Disney movies always have dead parents. And growing up with a dying parent and then having a dead parent, it was always very cathartic for me, and I felt very at home in that. And then, of course, what we all know is that Disney just always has dead parents and doesn't address it. It's just like, oh, the parents are dead. And it's like not addressed. Like there's no grief. There's just death, but no grief. There's no struggle through that. It's just like, someone's dead. Okay, moving on. And what I'm realizing is that for me, that I wouldn't have ever questioned that. That felt normal because I grew up in a culture that is grief avoidant, and a family that was just like, yep, the parent's dead, moving on, so that felt normal. And then Disney has moved with culture to be a little bit more involving grief in our lives and integrating grief and addressing the pain. And now they're making movies like Frozen 2 that had dead parents and actually addressed the grief and the pain and the struggle in that. And then Onward, which even more so did that, like to where it's like the theme of the movie. And that wrecked me, like just slayed me watching that play out. That's where I saw myself with the death.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. In a similar way, that's kind of my answer as well. I didn't have a parent die like you did, but did grow up in a divorce household, and so for most of at least the years that I can remember, sort of growing up, my dad wasn't really physically around all that much. Just kind of every other weekend sort of arrangement, and then even when we were together, there wasn't real closeness there. So watching this, how did I see myself in the story? There was a lot of overlap between Barley and Ian as it relates to me and my younger brother, and kind of that dynamic there. And it's interesting because I don't think I definitely didn't consciously growing up. I didn't have I need to be a sort of father figure because my younger brother doesn't have one. Like that wasn't ever really in my mind. But I don't know that it wasn't Barley's mind either, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that was kind of a part of the cool thing at the
It was
end
one
is
of the
that
most
Ian
beautiful things.
realized it, but it wasn't that Barley was consciously like, oh, I
Mhm.
got to step in and be this role. But I think my brother and I have talked about this over the years, sort of looking back and just reflecting on that, on that kind of dynamic there. So that was real, like, it was super moving for me to watch that play out and see the bond that those two brothers shared over, just not having the dad around and having to figure out what are some of the gaps that can be present in our lives when certain parental energy or presence is absent. What are those gaps, and how might they be filled in other ways? Because there isn't a one size fits all for these sort of gaps in our lives. They can be filled in other ways. So that was that's one of the 14 reasons why I love this movie.
What's our next question?
Okay. Okay. Question number 4. What truths about transformation did you experience? Do you want me to go first on this one?
Sure.
Okay. Well, here is what comes up for me in this question. So again, part of the goal of this series is to engage with some of the deep questions about meaning in our life and how do we make meaning out of our life, and that the way that movies can just sort of bring these things up to the surface for us to engage with. I was struck by one of the things that I have learned both experientially and then just through studying this is that how we treat others impacts how they live. Like, it might sound weird to just say that out loud, like, well, duh, but no, like how we actually think about others. So maybe back it up, not even treat, but how we think about others, the opinions that we hold of other people, that trickles down into how we treat them, and that has real world effects on how people live, on what their lives are like. Specifically, if people believe in us, if they believe in us, then they treat us differently. And if they treat us differently as though we're more capable, then we will respond accordingly. So I came across this study, and I think I talked about it in a sermon like 5 years ago at Sojourn, but I came across this study that done by Bob Rosenthal, who took a lab full of rats, my worst nightmare, lab full of rats, and went in one night and just segregated the rats into 2 groups and hung sign over one that said, it said incredibly smart, sign over some rats, and then over the other rats, incredibly dumb. And of course, all the rats were the same. These were just completely arbitrary divisions, incredibly smart and incredibly dumb. And then he brought in his researcher assistants and he said, okay, now run the test, run all these rats through the mazes, through the different tests that we have, and just sort of see how they test. And what they found was just shocking, that the data was that the incredibly smart rats did the maze almost twice as fast or 2 times faster than the incredibly dumb rats. And the people who were looking at those numbers just were dumbfounded by the discrepancy in the way that these rats ran their course. And what they found as they dug into it further is that when it came to the incredibly smart rats, the research assistants were treating them with more care, more affection. They were handling them more kindly, because they had greater respect and appreciation and expectations for them. They expected this rat is incredibly smart, so it's going to run this maze really well. And then it did, because it was the recipient of this kindness and this affection and this more gentleness. Whereas the incredibly dumb rats, they were just sort of treated like incredibly dumb rats, and then they responded accordingly. And one researcher, Carol Dweck, a psychologist at Stanford, and reflecting on this study, she said, if you have lower expectations of someone, your body language will reflect it. And you may stand farther from them, or you make less eye contact with them. But if you have you treat people differently if you think less about them, or if you think conversely. And so in this movie, Barley believed in Ian. in really meaningful way. Like he believed Ian could do magic. Ian, the whole movie long, was struggling with believing himself, but Barley's like, no, you can do this because he's a 4. You can do this. You can do this. I know you can make that bridge, Barley said to Ian. And this belief slowly began to impact Ian over the course of the movie, to where Ian then began to bring this belief into himself as well. One of my favorite lines is Barley says to his brother, there's a mighty warrior inside of you. You just have to let him out. So that, I think, is a powerful truth about transformation, that how we think about people impacts how we treat them, and how we treat them impacts how they live and respond. So,
like that scene that I just looked over and stole your notes because you didn't say this part, so I'm saying it for you. But that scene that we just mentioned earlier about the bridge, he says, I know you can make this bridge, because Ian has no interest in walking across that magic bridge. And then by the end, Ian is dancing on the bridge. I could stay out here forever, because his brother believed in him. So much so that he didn't tell him that the safety net had.
Great scene.
Such a good scene. All right.
What about you? What truth about transformation?
Oh, right. I thought I already answered that. Few things. I don't have a ton to say about them, but they just really stood out to me. One was that Ian doesn't know how to drive, and he's forced into it, and his brother yells at him, "You'll never be ready." And I'm just
Merge.
like, yup. That's true about transformation and growth. You'll never be ready for anything in your life. You'll never be ready. So you just do it. Just merge. I love that. And then I kept seeing it in relation. This movie for me is so about relationship more than anything else. So growth and transformation in relationship. One thing that stood out to me is that we have to learn to trust people to make their own mistakes, to not try to go around and save our people from messing up, to not convince them, don't do that thing when you know that thing is going to be horrible, because A, it might not be, and B, if it is, that's not bad. That's how we learn and grow. And we are constantly, especially in parenting, oh my God, we are constantly trying to save our people from making mistakes, when the most loving thing to do is to just let go and let people make mistakes and not try to convince them that those mistakes would ruin them. That's the most unloving thing we can do for our people. Mistakes don't ruin you, they make you. And so in relationship, that trust to watch people do their own work there. I think that really played out with Ian actually trying to control, because he had all that fear and anxiety, trying to control Barley, and Barley's like, let's go this way. I know my gut is telling me. Let's go.
Man, that contrast between the gut and Ian's head.
Yeah.
That was good.
Maybe Barley's 8 then with the 7 wing. I don't know. But anyway, there's some real gut head warring there. And I just, I wanted to like scream at the movie, like, Ian, just let Barley, like, so what if he is going to fly into a mistake? Like, let him fly into a mistake.
Yeah, he's got that line where, because there's that scene where Ian says that, no, he doesn't think his brother's a screw up, but the magic then revealed, no, you actually did think your brother's a screw up.
Yes.
Which I think, I didn't end up going in my notes, but I love that scene for so many reasons. But the paradox of it is both true. Yes, the magic was correct that on some level, Ian did think his brother Barley was a screw up. But I also think Ian was true later when he was trying to tell his brother, I don't think you're like, we just don't have the space. The magical spell didn't have the space to handle the nuance of what that might mean to both think someone is and think someone isn't a screw up. Yeah. But Barley's like, what was the line? Like, how can I let you, or how can I show you that I'm not a screw up if you never give me the chance to make a decision? If you never give me a chance to do it my way. Yeah,
that is when I wrote this note. Okay, thank you. I didn't put the quote with it, but that is when I wrote that note. Exactly that moment. Yep. Got to give people freedom, complete freedom to bungle and make mistakes. All right.
Hashtag freedom to bungle.
What's our next question about this movie?
Question 5 is, what unhealthy stereotypes or narratives were either exposed or perpetuated? So the idea of this question is self-explanatory. I don't need to redundantly explain it.
That's correct. You
I
don't.
was about to. Stop.
Because that's your favorite thing.
my favorite thing. Over-explaining.
Do you have something you want to share?
Yeah. So right off the bat, the opening line of the movie, and you quoted this earlier, the opening line of the movie says, "Long ago, the world was full of wonder. There was magic." And then it goes on to talk about how that was eventually replaced, like you said, with technology, because technology made things easier. It did. Technology's easier. You flip a switch and you have light. Technology lets things be controllable. You can contain the energy, whereas magic is more predictable. Technology makes life more predictable. Magic is very unpredictable. And so the narrative of convenience, what I was hearing in this movie is that the narrative of convenience, that life is all like just make it more convenient and make it easier, that ends up eliminating effort and struggle and overcoming, which are all some of the best parts of life. So maybe convenience and things being easier and more controllable is not really ideal. There is part of what postmodernism has given us as a gift is the way that it's critiqued modernity, because modernity believed that that reason and logic and science can get us to utopia. That we can build the perfect world through just logic and science and reason. But postmodernity comes along and says, no, that it didn't work. That experiment didn't work. There are some truths that science cannot teach. We need wonder. We need magic. We need mystery. So that I thought that was a beautiful way of sort of exposing the narrative of convenience, that life is better without struggle. Life is better with convenience and some controllability. So this week I read about what's called the experience machine, and it comes from this philosopher Robert Nozick. In 1974, he wrote about this thought experiment that later was called the experience machine or the pleasure machine. And the thought experiment goes like this: imagine that science has figured out how to plug you into a machine where anything that you desire, whatever is pleasurable, like you just can have that all the time. You could be hooked up to the machine. Your brain would be stimulated in such a way as to induce pleasure in a way that you wouldn't even know that you were on a machine. So just a life of pure bliss, pleasure, and joy. No pain, no suffering. So the thought experiment is, would you choose that, or would you choose real life, which clearly does not have the benefits of the pleasure machine? And overwhelmingly, as people work through this thought experiment, and actually, as I'm talking about this, the show The Good Place.
I was waiting for you to break so I could say, "Oh my God, you mean like
Honey,
The Good Place?"
You can't wait for me to break. That may never come. So I'm gonna,
I was gonna say that. Yes.
Yeah. So that's like
love that show.
A 21st century edition of the experience machine, where that isn't like life has to be about more than just pleasure. It has to be. Because we just, as humans, we realize we would choose the effort and the overcoming and the obstacle. So all that to say, the Manticore, the character of the Manticore has this great line: you have to have risks in order to have an adventure, which is, she has like, if you remember, Barley says that to the Manticore. Barley says, you have to have risks in order to have an adventure. And the Manticore is like, that's absurd. Who thinks that? And then Barley points to a poster that quotes the Manticore. You have to have risks to have an adventure. So this is the narrative for me that was exposed, the narrative of life is about pleasure, hedonism. It's about just getting your desires satisfied. Let's do away with all the complications of things like magic, the unpredictability of life and chaos, and let's just make it controlled and predictable. And isn't that better? No.
Love it.
You? Unhelpful, untrue narratives that were either exposed or perpetuated?
Yeah, much like the Frozen franchise, I feel like in general, movie makers are just getting better at exposing these stereotypes and stories instead of perpetuating them. So I feel like Onward really did that. Things like emotionality in male characters, male presenting characters, or male identifying, having the whole film be about emotional, relational connection and emotional expression in male characters things like that were done really beautifully. The one area, and this is being so picky, but I just have a kind of thing about it. The one area where I feel like they perpetuated a stereotype, but not in like a horrible way, but just one that I think is interesting to note, is with step parents. The idea of a person coming into a family in the step role, and just kind of that idea that that's an automatic, you're going to fight, you're going to not like each other, there's going to be jealousy there. They pointed to that several times. And I don't even know what more to say about it other than it feels like a stereotype that sets us up for failure when we already believe that it's like
They kind of fell into that trope, didn't
a little bit, and it's not a big deal except for to say that it is a big deal. Why am I acting like it's not a big deal? It's a big deal. And it's a big deal to me because we need to get to a place where we see family as so much more than this nuclear, husband, wife, stay together forever. I mean, so many things wrong with that. And then families are just looking more and more different as we move into healthier ideas of what it is to love and to be family. But if we set ourselves up for step-parent relationship has to be tension and struggle, and the evil stepmother trope is just so over that. I mean, that just adds misogyny level on. And anyway, I'm ranting, but I feel like that was in there a little bit, and I wish that we would move to healthier ideas of family and what it means to bring someone in who's not blood related, that it doesn't even have to be like, I don't know, it doesn't have to be all that difficult. Sometimes it is really difficult, but we set ourselves up for it's just going to be with these tropes. So anyway, what's our next question?
Last question.
We're on the last one already with this? We're flying through Onward. I love this movie so much. We should talk about it for longer. We put it in a... That was a great move, by the way.
That was what?
A great move. The title of the movie being the whole character of his van was just my favorite thing.
Guinevere?
Yeah. So great.
That was almost, as I was thinking through the first question. So yeah, we can hang on the movie a bit longer. As I was thinking about the first question about how did you see Christ, I almost talked about Guinevere and that scene where Barley sacrifices Guinevere for the quest. And just what an act of love that was, because Barley just loved his van, but he knew the only way they could get away and continue their quest was to fell the rocks on the mountain. And so he sent Guinevere off to... So good. I hope that by now, if you haven't seen Onward and you've put up with the 34 minutes of us talking about it so far, that we've convinced you to watch it.
So good.
Don't be turned off by the animated part of it. I don't know what this is.
I don't either.
Yeah, I'm
See,
animated.
talking with hands is weird. Meaning of life. Where did we see the meaning of life? Just a little question. I'll answer. I got really excited when you talked about where you saw your own story in this, because you wrapped that up, that idea of like not having a certain role or person. And you talked about how basically at the end of the movie, Ian realizes, I've thought that my whole life I didn't have a father figure. And then
Good was that. Checking off the things in the notebook and the flashback to all the moments and when those things happened.
I can't. But for me, that was the meaning of life, in that anytime, and I talked about this last week with Frozen 2, that anytime we ask what the meaning of life is, I just come back to so cliche. It's just all about love. And specifically, so I had a specific in there last week, and specifically this week, it's that love is expansive and a renewable resource. And yeah, and it was because of seeing that like dad brother role that sometimes, and especially for Ian, so no doubt it's painful to not ever get to know his dad. Totally, you know me, I would never dismiss or demean any sort of painful experience, but he lives as though this loss is a certain story in his life. And then he looks back and realizes, but I had that in Barley the whole time. And I don't even have words for it. It's just so beautiful. So freaking beautiful. I just can't. I can't with this movie, you guys. So good. Anyway.
So for you, so the meaning, so love is expansive. Like
Yeah, it's like
it can fill the gaps.
Yes, because you said that earlier too about even to the point where I would almost say like he realized that the hole wasn't really a hole; it had been filled all along.
Ooh. The meaning of life that was illuminated for me in this film was that life is about the journey more than the destination.
More cliches.
Yeah, more cliches. They are that way for a reason. That life is about the journey more than the destination. Toward the end of the movie, Barley says to his brother, "Follow the quest and lead us to victory," because they're right near the end of this long quest, and Barley they're ready to find the Phoenix Gem, and yet when they get to the place that they believe is going to be the end of the quest, where they finally will find the gem that they're seeking, they end up busting out of a manhole, like a sewer hole, and realize that they're right by the high school, right where they began. They just went in a big long circle, and they're right back where they began, just flush with disappointment, realizing this whole thing they thought was just a waste of time. And this is life. In so many ways, this is life. This never-ending pattern of great hope and expectation, only to so oftentimes be met with incredible disappointment that it just wasn't what you thought it was going to be, or that you just feel like you wound up right where you were. Like, what really did you gain in the last year of your life? Like, are you really anywhere different? But I think that if we can recalibrate, this is how I think about it in my own life. If I can recalibrate to not invest my well-being, to not invest my emotional well-being on how the destination goes or what the destination is, but instead, if I can surrender the outcome, be completely open-handed with what the destination might be, what it might look like, when it might feel like I've arrived, just be totally open to that. Then I think we're freed up to enjoy the journey. We're freed up to enjoy the quest. Suddenly now where you end up, even if it feels like it's at the beginning, is less important because your emotional well-being is not invested in that. You are surrendering that, and you are simply open and present to the journey. And that's what you get to enjoy. And then even more so than just, quote, enjoying the journey, we discover that the magic really, really is in the quest. That really is where the fruit is enjoyed. That really is where the transformation happens. It's in the quest, not the destination. It's in the process that we learn about who we are, and we learn about the people who love us, and we learn about what we're capable of. So I thought this movie did a great job I loved how they just brought them after this big old quest right back to where they began, so that they had this moment of great disappointment, only to realize that, no, everything, that moment we talked about with Ian looking back and realizing, oh, everything I've been looking for in this imaginary end point has been happening all along, and we can stop and celebrate that.
I love it. And it actually brought me back to a point that I missed earlier about growth and transformation, which I think it's great to go back to growth and transformation when talking about the meaning of life, because that's probably part of the meaning of life, right? Growth and transformation. And I was remembering as you were talking about what you were about, when Barley shares this moment. Oh my God, it's so hard for me to talk about. I can do this. I can do this. I can cry while I talk, right? Barley shares this moment about how he had always covered up. He had told Ian, I think I'm remembering this right, he'd made it seem to Ian like he had said goodbye to their dad because he was older or was alive. Actually, Ian wasn't even alive. He was in the womb. He was around, and he had made it seem like he had gone into the hospital to say goodbye to their dad. And he finally, at this point, shares with Ian that, no, I never did go in there. I was too scared. I looked through the door of the hospital, and I saw all the tubes, and I got too scared, and I didn't go in there. And then he shares a step further that moment for him was what set his journey in place of, he says to Ian, I decided right then and there that I would never let myself be too afraid again. I probably botched how he really said that, but basically like that whole I'm not afraid of anything that he becomes, that Enneagram 7, or I could even see that being 8. A lot of 7s and 8s will talk about that forming story of I will never again, which I think that about all of us, like even going back to well, anything having to do with our personality types, people are always asking that age-old question, right, of nurture or nature, and it's always yes, but that nurture part, going back to last week with Frozen, with Elsa, you could be like, is she really an Enneagram 4, or is she just actually tortured? She just actually has these special powers, right? But that's the whole thing with our personalities and with our growth and our journeys, is that there's an experience that shapes us, or many experiences that shape us. And the journey, which is why it made me think of this, because you were talking about the journey. The journey is owning what makes us us and understanding each other's. Like, I imagine Ian sitting there listening to Barley explain that, and finally he's always brushed his brother off like, ugh, and then he hears the why. Like, I'm always talking about that at Sojourn, the why behind someone's story. He hears, oh, this is why Barley acts this way, because of this life-shaping story. People are the way they are for really good reasons, and part of the journey is looking back and naming those points and saying, this is why. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop acting this way, because those things are so ingrained in us, but I can do it now with intention and awareness, which changes the way in which I do it. Anyway.
It's good. Good stuff. We found personally a lot of meaning in this movie, both for our own individual lives and big picture meaning of life. So, and that's why we wanted to do this series, because we personally find these sort of conversations and insights to be just really life-giving and fun, and we know that many of you do as well. And so we thought if we just helped facilitate this at a larger church level, could spark some really good conversation. So this concludes our message time. I believe, if I remember how the video is going to go, we're going to throw it back to the band for this week 2 of partial live service.
I don't know why you're calling it partial live still, but next week we will see you back live.
Because I don't need to explain it. It's a good term. You don't have to like it.
See you next week.
This is a hymn for all our best laid plans. This is our requiem to longing. We stand in memory of what might have been. We stand apart in our belonging. This is a dirge for all the future's lost. We mourn the comfort of security, and we stand ahead of the unmeasured cost. We stand as one in our priority. Is a tribute to the lost and waiting, to the tired and the weeping, to the crowded, the isolated, to the stressed and barely sleeping. Oh, this is an anthem for the heavy-hearted, an invasion for the lonely, an echo sounding from our front porch foxholes for everyone and for you only. May you be well. May we strengthen connection. A love song to our empty spaces. The way that hope abides in shadow form on silent streets and covered faces. This is a prayer for our collective recovery. This is our cry for resurrection. We appeal to tenacious history and love's wild interjection. May you be well. May you be held. May you be well. May you be held. May you be well. May you be held. May you be well.
And so may you be well. Ah, gosh, I love that song every time you do it. We'll do it even when quarantine's over, right? Is quarantine gonna be
Is
over?
quarantine ever gonna be over?
Go away, quarantine. I'm excited for the post-quarantine hymn.
Oh.
The quarantine hurt.
Do we have to title it that?
This has been lovely to be with you.
Looking down.
Thank you for tuning in, and we, all things, if things go well, we'll be back live in 7 days,
Fully.
right? Fully live, entirely back to life.
I don't know. Maybe we like zombie life.
Maybe we like zombie life. This is great. All right, benediction time. Someone back there got us?
Be brave
Because you're a child of God.
and be kind.
Because so is everyone else.
Mostly.
Have a good. You've been reading too many articles.
I've
Love
been
ya.
on the internet too much
Bye.
today.